Gartland Law presents Taxes, the IRS, and You with your host, Bernie Gartland. Taxes, the IRS, and You is a different kind of show that'll help you solve your tax problems. As former Deputy Attorney General of the state of Delaware and with over 25 years of experience as sole practitioner in both Delaware and California, the name Bernie Gartland has become synonymous with taxes. And now your host, Bernie Gartland.
Hey everybody, I'm Bernie Gartland. The name of the program is Taxes, the IRS, and You. And each week we're going to present to you information that's going to help you with your tax problems, your credit problems, and maybe some bankruptcy problems. However, today we have in studio one of the noted national tax attorneys going to help you. Well, how is he going to help you? He's going to help you to know how to protect assets. And his name is Tim Berry. Welcome, Tim.
Hi, Bernie. Thank you for having me.
Right. Now, you and I have been giving lectures and seminars across the United States for 8-9 years. And about 4 years ago, I decided I didn't want to spend my weekends in airports. So you have taken over for me. So here's what the question is. What do you do that helps people who have credit problems, creditors pounding on their door, and IRS problems? And how did you get into that arena?
Sure, Bernie. Let me just kind of answer that backwards, if you will. How did I get into that arena? The way I got into that arena is years ago, I started off as pretty much a stockbroker financial planner and helping people with their finances. And then whenever I was a stockbroker, someone came in and gave a neat presentation on a sort of trust, a charitable remainder trust, which you're well aware of. And I was blown away by the concept of how people could utilize trusts to protect assets and also give them fantastic tax savings to start having their assets grow in a tax-free manner. So ever since that presentation, I thought, well, I want to learn as much as I can about these neat trusts. And that led to me going to law school and working with people on taxes. Now, how can I work with people and how can I help them out? Well, the main way that I help people out right now is sharing with them strategies on how they can protect their assets. And this is super important in this current environment. Almost everybody I know has a foreclosure or short sale or something of that nature, and they got this overhanging liability. And another issue we got going on right now is this age wave. We have so many people who are doing their estate planning right now, and a big comment they make is, hey, Tim, I want to be able to pass on some money to my kid, to my grandkid, but I know they got IRS issues. I know they got creditor issues.
Credit issues. Now, you know from being connected with our firm and with me for many, many, many years, you know that we specialize in tax problem solving.
Sure.
Okay? Coupled with tax problem solving, we always run into people that have tax problems. They didn't pay MasterCard. They didn't pay JCPenney's. They got judgments against them. They got repos. Short sale you were talking about. In a short sale, you know as a tax attorney that there's something called 1099-C, cancellation of debt, which may result in income. Yep. So these are the clients that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. So when you and I talked a long time ago in saying, how can we protect present day and future assets of the people that have these problems. Okay, and one of the things that we ran into was mom and pop want to help their children out. Mom and pop work hard. They don't have any tax problems. They don't have any IRS problems. They don't have any creditor problems. But they got a daughter or son that had some problems in their life, but they want to leave this money to them. How can they protect it? And that's what you and I are talked about for a long time, that there are ways that mom and dad can feel very secure that what they're going to leave their children, even though they have all these problems, and by the way, may have some problems in the future, okay, the protection. And that's what the concept you've come up with. Is that correct?
That's correct. And Bernie, let's go back to that one client a few years back. I'm sure you remember Mark from Colorado.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
you remember Mark from Colorado.
Right.
His aunt was going to leave him a few $1 million. And he was embarrassed, flummoxed. He didn't know how to say to the aunt, hey, aunt, we got to do something special because I owe the IRS $350,000. And now, once he was able to break the news to the aunt, who was really mad at first, saying, I don't want to leave you money if the IRS is just going to come in and take it away. So simple solution, we have aunt create a trust, Now that money can go into the trust for the benefit of Mark, so he gets the benefit of the use of this $3 million or so, but the trust is just drafted correctly so that if the IRS comes knocking on his door and says, hey, Mark, fork over the money, Mark doesn't owe that money or own that money inside the trust does. He's protected.
Well, let me develop this a little bit further.
Sure.
There are a lot of what I call estate planning mills out there. Get them in, get them out, get them in, get them out, boilerplates. You're not talking about a boilerplate, are you?
No, nothing is boilerplate. And let me just do a quick segue on that. We have someone coming in at 12 o'clock today who their parent set up one of these boilerplate trusts, and now they have IRS issues, and the IRS is going to take away their inheritance. It's about $120,000. It's going to disappear because the parents use that boilerplate trust. So we don't do the boilerplate. We do specialized attention, customization, if you will.
Right. And everybody's happy. Okay.
Everybody's happy,
now,
except for the IRS, unfortunately.
Now, here's a situation. Going back to, we at our law firm, Gartland Law, we interview people that haven't filed tax returns in several years, or the IRS has filed in several years for them. The concept is, can you even protect real estate? Can you protect gifts, inheritance, et cetera? Now, you and I kind of worked on a case some years ago. Palm Springs, okay? Not only Colorado, Palm Springs. And what happened in that case? The mother had the foresightedness to create a trust, to put the house she owned in the trust, and the guy ended up owing about $480,000 in taxes. Now, you know and I know that taxes can be eliminated in bankruptcy under certain circumstances. Okay?
Absolutely. Few people know that. That's the amazing part.
And by the way, self-serving advertising. In one of our next weekly programs, we're going to cover dischargeability of taxes in bankruptcy.
Well, why wouldn't you? You're the one who got the process going in the early 80s.
In 1988, and I'll tell that story, which is a very interesting story at that time. But we did put the guy in bankruptcy. In fact, we had to get you involved because the IRS did not understand the concept of why that house was protected, even though the client who was discharging the taxes in bankruptcy was living in that house. Why was that so important to have that trust structured correctly?
Well, it was so important to have that trust structured properly in that the IRS, a lot of people have studied these things called spendthrift trusts, and that's probably giving too much information to the listeners, getting into some arcane language, if you will. But in California, under certain situations, the IRS doesn't have to pay attention to those spendthrift trusts. They can just go in there and start taking away assets inside a trust, but then there's another layer of protection, and this trust had that other layer of protection. So it really goes back to, don't use the run-of-the-mill stuff. You got to use the stuff specialized for your particular situation.
So it always gets back to the same thing again, is that there cannot be 100% protection with a boilerplate trust set up by somebody who's going to charge X little amount of dollars and say, okay, you're protected. And so you
and Bernie, let me just interject here
Sure.
real quick. You know, there's certain national marketing organizations that talk about they can help people save on tax liability. And whenever somebody signs up with them, they just are given some boilerplate garbage, if you will. And you probably see this all the time with your clients. They come and say, hey, at first I started using these people, but now I got to come to you, Bernie, because they didn't do it properly.
Okay, let's go into that in a moment. We're going to take a break now. When we come back, we're going to talk to Tim Berry, who's a nationally known tax attorney and estate planning attorney. And if you want to, at some point in time, go to our website, gartlandlaw.com, and you'll find a lot of information that's connected with this subject as well as other subjects.
Visit us on the web at www.gartlandlaw.com.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bernie Gartland. Let me introduce you to Kimberly and Brian from American Tax Centers.
When filing taxes, you want them done quickly and accurately.
We have over 24 years of tax preparation experience. And speaking as a former state auditor, we know accuracy.
Whether it's current year or prior year tax returns, we know that our experience will work for you.
So call us today for a free consultation and peace of mind to know that your taxes are done right.
Hey everybody, it's Bernie Gartland. The name of the program is Taxes, the IRS and You. And each week we're going to present you information that you need to know to help you with your tax problems, your credit problems, and asset protection. And in-house today, we've already been talking to Tim Berry, a nationally known tax attorney, and he is going to talk about estate planning and trust on how you can protect your income and your assets, and also how your mom and dad can protect their wealth that they want to give to you, even though you may be a no-good-nick. Okay? So, Tim, we're talking about trust. Okay? I'm going to give you an example. About 5 years ago, I had a client. He was a doctor out of Beverly Hills area. And what happened is he came in to see me because he had a tax problem. I was absolutely blown away, amazed that when I sat down and talked to him and we started, our normal conversation of what are your assets and how much you earn there like that, he was earning quite a lot of money. He had $4.5 million worth of duplexes and apartment buildings in a living family trust. And when I was talking with him, I said, well, I'm going to help you out with your tax problems. I said, but I want to make sure that your assets are protected. Mm-hmm. He said, oh, yeah, the Wilshire Boulevard attorney put me into a trust. And I'm thinking that maybe he's got an irrevocable trust or he's got a CRT, charitable remainder trust. And he says, no, it's a living trust. Mm-hmm. And I looked at him and I said, you got to be kidding me. Mm-hmm. Your attorney told you that your assets are protected in a living trust, what we know as a family trust, a revocable living trust? Mm-hmm. He said, yes. Is there something I should be concerned about? Mm-hmm. Okay, what would you have told him at that point?
Well, probably at this point I wouldn't be concerned, because if he had $5 million worth of real estate back then, he's probably in the hole with the current economy.
Right.
Yeah, bad joke. Sorry,
that
Bernie.
was,
a little bit of attorney
right,
humor
right.
there. But no, Bernie, you already know, a living trust, a revocable living trust.
Right.
Basic concept of asset protection. Anything you own, any powers that you have, your creditors step into your shoes and have the same power.
I don't understand that, Tim, because the attorneys say you're fully protected.
Well, what's the old myth about attorneys and their lips moving? Sorry, once again, more bad attorney jokes here. But it comes down to lack of knowledge. There's a lot of attorneys, they specialize in certain areas, and they don't know about other areas. So if you go to an attorney to set up a trust, and at 9 o'clock they're handling a personal injury case, at 10 o'clock they're handling a real estate closing, and at 11 o'clock they're going to devote all their knowledge to your trust, you need to go somewhere else. You need to work with somebody who knows about trust. Right. In particular, revocable living trust, fantastic for avoiding probate. Absolutely fantastic for avoiding probate.
And that's the whole purpose of that kind of trust. And from what I understand for all the years I've been practicing, is that that's the main reason to have a revocable living trust, to avoid probate. But it does not create any asset protection.
You hit it right on the head. Okay. No asset protection. The first one of those things, revocable, although you highfalutin people call it revocable or revocable. I can't even pronounce it correctly, Bernie, the way you do it. But it's revocable. If you have the power of revoking that trust and getting the assets inside there, if you get hit with a lawsuit and lose that lawsuit, guess what they have? The exact same power to revoke that trust and grab your family's wealth away. So the first thing you have to do, you have to set up an irrevocable trust.
Well, that's exactly why we're here today, because the general public really has in their mind, oh boy, I'm just going to go down to the local attorney and get a revocable living trust and I'm fully protected. And what we're telling people, and the purpose of this program today is, you guys and gals are not getting the right information, and what you need to do is listen to what Tim's saying. Now, what about an irrevocable trust, and what about a CRT? Explain that, and also spendthrift clauses, because these are the areas that protect the mom and pop's inheritance going to the children who may have some financial problems and IRS problems. How do those three aspects play out in what you know?
Sure. The three aspects of the irrevocable trust, the CRT, and the spendthrift language. Let's start off with the basics. An irrevocable trust. Mom and dad established this trust for you. It's irrevocable. You can't revoke it and get the assets out. So if
that's a good thing.
That's a very good thing. Yeah. And a lot of people freak out whenever they hear irrevocable. And they think, oh, you can't change that. And au contraire, yes, you can. By statute, irrevocable trust can actually be changed. That's a mind blower for so many people.
That is a mind blower, because, I mean, what would be the purpose of having it not revocable, yet you can revoke it? And how does that how does that play out in the creditors coming in and saying, well, since you can by statute revoke it, why can't we revoke it?
Well, let's not go into too much information on too deep on that, because that's going to get really confusing. Because once I start hearing about revocable, irrevocable, and revoking irrevocable trusts, I'm thinking, okay, I'm done. I'm out of here. That's confusing me, Bernie.
Yeah.
So just accept that an irrevocable trust is going to give asset protection, and don't be worried that once you've set up an irrevocable trust, it's written in stone. It's not. It's very flexible for asset protection purposes. You still get the asset protection, but it's still a very flexible trust document. The charitable remainder trust, it's a subset of an irrevocable trust.
Okay.
And typically, whenever you got some highly appreciated assets that you want to sell off, and for some strange reason you don't want to pay taxes right then on the sale of those assets, what you would do is you would put the assets, the real estate, the business, whatever, inside that charitable remainder trust. Now you get a tax deduction just for putting it inside that trust, and now the trust can sell it and not pay a single dime in taxes. So that's pretty cool. That's the thing where I first fell in love with trust, was that CRT. And then we get to the spendthrift language. Spendthrift language in a trust is the fancy language inside of one of these trusts that says the assets can't be taken away. And that's just the beginning of the asset protection of a trust, though, because I can't tell you how many trusts I've seen, some of your clients going through bankruptcy, and they have spendthrift trusts that were established by other people, but the spendthrift trust says, we're going to force money on Junior whenever they turn 35. And now Junior is 45 years old, they're going through bankruptcy, and the bankruptcy trustee can take those assets away, even though it's a spendthrift trust.
So when you go into bankruptcy and you list down assets or any interest in assets, and the trustees, these trustees are very smart. They're attorneys, they're CPAs, and they're saying, let me see the trust itself. And they're going to go through with a fine-tooth comb, and they're going to see, well, wait a minute, this could have been fully distributed at age 35, and you're 52 or 47 or 45. Well, the trustee steps into the rights of the debtor. What does the trustee do in that case then?
Well, if the debtor had the right to take those assets at 35, guess what the bankruptcy trustee is going to do?
Right.
They're going to take away those assets. So this poor soul who thought they were protected, they just lost it all.
Well, there's a Latin phrase that I learned in law school once.
Are we allowed to say that on TV?
We're allowed to say SOL. I mean, that's sure out of luck, right?
No, statute of limitations.
Statute of limitation, right. Well, we're sure out of luck, because what happens is that if you have that kind of language and you have problems, then you haven't been protected the way you should be protected. And so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the knowledge of someone like you that have spent many, many years analyzing these situations on how to put together trusts properly, rather than being, well, I use a phrase, get them in, get them out, get them in, get them out, a mill.
Sure.
You don't do that. You structure it as to the wants and needs of the parties involved. And the parties involved are the children and also to the parents. Now, Tim, I'm going to take a short self-serving, crass commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to talk further with Tim Berry about structuring the proper asset protection through a trust for the protection of your future income and for your future inheritance.
Stay tuned. Bernie will be right back with more tax solutions.
Well, it's that time of year again. Yes, it's tax preparation season again. Hi, I'm Bernie Gartland. For years, we at Gartland Law have been preparing your prior year's unfiled tax returns. Well, we also have the ability to do your current year tax preparation. If you haven't filed tax returns for several years, or you simply want us to prepare the current year tax return, we can help. Call us today to set up your tax preparation appointment. Hey everybody, it's Bernie Gartland. Name of the program is Taxes, the IRS and You. We're here every single week to talk about subjects that you need to know. And in-house today is Tim Berry, a noted tax attorney that Tim and I have been knowing each other for about 10 years or so.
Seems like forever, Bernie.
Seems forever. And we're talking about asset protection. Now, Tim, one of the things that I've said over and over again for the last several minutes is, if you're going to go to these different mills that just print out boilerplates, you may not get protection. Now, I'm going to bring up a subject that's near and dear to your heart.
I know where you're going with this boilerplate.
This is a boilerplate. How many people believe that their IRAs are protected? Even the bankruptcy court says if you have an IRA and you file bankruptcy, it is protected under what they call an exemption. In fact, in California, up to $1 million. But this is not really reality, is it?
Well, it's really interesting. I'm going to pull a famous presidential line and say, what is. You were talking about IRAs are protected. You're absolutely right. IRAs are protected. But here's the interesting part. A lot of people, millions of people, they think they have IRAs, but unbeknownst to them, because of the boilerplate language inside their brokerage applications for IRAs,
yes,
Department of Labor, the entity in charge of this stuff, has said that language violates the tax code, and so they do not have IRAs. And now, if they file bankruptcy, if they have creditor issues, their nest egg, their retirement savings, can be taken away in one fell swoop.
And that happened to an individual in Tennessee, which I'll go into in a minute. What's confusing to folks out there probably is this. If there has to be a federal agency that has the power to tell you what you can or cannot do with an IRA, when we give our lecture seminars, they say, well, it's the Security and Exchange Commission. Oh, no. It's the, I don't know how they got the FTC at one time. I don't know how they got that, but it's always the Department of Treasury. No, it's not. Well, then it's the IRS. Well, guess what the Department of Treasury is, okay? It's the Department of Labor. 1978 Tax Reform Act under President Carter shifted everything to the Department of Labor. You know that there was a ruling in 2009 and 2010. Both rulings identified exactly what you're talking about, is that the IRAs that were created with the proper form, proper application that was worded correctly are, in fact, IRAs. The ones that have certain language, prohibited transaction language, you call it bad language, okay? Are they IRAs? No.
They're not. And you talk about prohibited transactions. That's a section of the tax code that says if your IRA engages in something labeled as a prohibited transaction by the tax code, your IRA is fully distributed, is blown up, it no longer exists. And unfortunately, a lot of very large brokerage firms have that language inside their applications that causes a prohibited transaction.
And one of the things I want to tell the folks out there, when Tim says large brokerage firms, we're talking about humongously large, very nationally known brokerage firms that have already agreed in some certain cases that their application is defective and that they promise to cure that defect. But that's not binding on the IRS. So if it's blown up, if it's defective, it had a bad language, what can the IRS do?
Let's talk about what the IRS is doing right now. They came out and they issued a notice in December. And they said, we're well aware of this problem, but we're going to stick our heads in the sand and we're not going to do anything until the Department of Labor provides a cure. But they had a little caveat, and I had to use the word caveat to prove I'm an attorney. They had a little side thing there that says, unless somebody's IRA is acted upon, then we're going to have to charge them taxes. So jumping ahead a little bit, there's a poor soul in Tennessee who lost their IRA, and the IRS's announcement said, since this was acted upon, this person lost their nest egg, their retirement funds, and now the IRS is going to tag them with taxes too. It's crazy.
Right. The whole thing is crazy. And as a matter of fact, what happened to the trustee, and it's a Tennessee bankruptcy case, and the trustee knew about the defective language and asked the debtor's attorney for the application. And it was one of the top two brokers across the United States. And he read the application, and it had that bad language in that the Department of Labor has already ruled is bad language and therefore void. Therefore, it's not an IRA. It's only a cash account. And the judge ordered $61,644 of that turned over to the trustee for distributing to the creditors. And I think that I use a Rick Perry-ism, is that the attorney then turned to the debtor and said, oops, because he had that labeled as exempt because it was an IRA.
Yep.
This is, and in fact, I know that you talked about, I initially talked about in the millions and then billions. You indicate that the amount of dollar to be affected by these bad language non-IRAs are $17.1 trillion?
Well, potentially. There's about 17.1 trillion with a TR dollars inside retirement plans as a whole. There's about 4.6 trillion, give or take a trillion here and there, in IRA accounts. And boiling this down, if your listeners have opened up an IRA with a large brokerage firm in the last 5 or 10 years, they really need to double check that account application, because that account application could cause a massive tax disaster for them. And if they're facing any creditor issues, they could lose that IRA in the blink of an eye.
Well, look, I know this is doom and gloom, but I have a perfect solution. So if I take a look at my application from these large brokers, and there's defective language in there, and I got 100,000, 200,000, a million in it. Well, Tim, I'm simply going to take that money and find a company that has non-defective language, that is perfect language for an IRA, and I'm going to simply take my $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 and put it in this IRA. It's cured.
You know, Bernie, I had that exact same situation happen probably about 6-7 months ago.
I thought you were going to say au contraire.
Well, I was going to say au contraire, but I'm an attorney. I bill by the word. I can't just say au contraire.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just gave him a softball. That's what I did. Okay.
So here's my au contraire. A client came to me. They had $1 million inside a retirement plan. They wanted to roll over to an IRA. I said, hold on, not so fast. We can't just roll it over into one of these accounts labeled as an IRA, because it may not be because of this bad language. So I researched a number of very large brokerage firms that this client would be comfortable with. None of them had language that I was comfortable with. So au contraire, I can't do that French stuff very good, Bernie. I'm not high sophisticated like yourself and everything, but au contraire, it is very rare to find a brokerage firm that does not have the bad language, that does not jeopardize your retirement account.
But if you do find it and you put that money into that IRA, what happens?
Well, here's the thing. If your IRA blew up at the first brokerage firm, you no longer have an IRA, you just have a personal savings account, and now you're making a contribution of personal savings of $500,000, $300,000 into an account that's supposed to be an IRA, so you're just racking up more tax bills. So you're doubling down on your problem. So people need to make sure that they have a valid IRA and to have the language in their current brokerage account read by an attorney.
You know, the funniest thing is that you and I have tried to inform a lot of brokers, a lot of CPAs, attorneys of this issue for the last 3 years. In the beginning of like 3 years ago, people just flat out wouldn't believe us. Now the IRS is coming out with announcements. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we have been here with Tim Berry talking about asset protection. We're talking about blown up IRAs. The name of the program is Taxes the IRS and You. We're here every single week. And Tim, I want to make sure that you give us a promise that you're going to come back and talk about other interesting items in the future, because you are one of the most, you're the man, the myth, the legend. Is that what it is?
That is you, Bernie.
So anybody who wants to, by the way, send us something by email. My email is bernie@gartlandlaw.com. That's bernie@gartlandlaw.com. Give us a email, ask your questions, give us comments, and also what I like to do is that if you have any areas that you would like to have discussion on in the future on this program, email me and let me know. In the meantime, Tim, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Bernie.
I appreciate it.